My parents hated him until he fixed their water heater. When I met Neil, dating wasn't even on my radar. I was juggling a barely paying job, a mountain of student loans, and a shoebox apartment shared with 2 roommates who treated toilet paper like a myth. Neil was the complete opposite of the guy my family had always pictured for me. Dropped out of community college after 1 semester, had a full sleeve of tattoos, worked at a garage, and was raising a 6-year-old daughter, Charlotte, from a previous relationship. My family's not rich, but they're obsessed with maintaining a very specific image. When I first mentioned Neil, my mom gave me that 3-second pause before the forced, "Oh, that's nice," which is basically her internal funeral procession. The first Sunday dinner, low-key traumatic. My parents' place isn't some mansion, just a basic suburban home. But the way they acted, you'd think Neil had shown up to Buckingham Palace in swim trunks. My dad grilled him about career goals, and my mom muttered stuff like, "I suppose Charlotte's mother is very young." Neil was calm, polite, never defensive, but I caught him wiping his palms on his jeans under the table. When my brother Tristan asked if Neil planned to finish school eventually, I nearly flipped the gravy boat. Later in the car, I apologized so much. Neil finally put his hand over my mouth and said, "They think I'm not good enough for you. Honestly, sometimes I wonder that too, but I'm selfish enough to keep showing up anyway." That was the moment I knew I was in too deep to ever get out. For 6 months, it was awkward AF. My mom sent me LinkedIn profiles of promising young men, like I was job hunting. My dad brought up gas prices every time Neil entered a room, like that was their only shared language. My aunt asked Neil to check her brakes at a birthday party, because he's a mechanic, right? The first tiny crack happened that January when my parents' ancient water heater died during the coldest week of the year. 3 plumbers quoted over $3K and couldn't come for 2 weeks. I mentioned it to Neil, who, after a 10-hour shift, showed up that same night, found a good secondhand unit through a work buddy, and installed it the next day. Charged them only for parts. My dad tried to pay him more. Neil just smiled and said, "Happy to help family." The way my dad's eyebrows shot up at the word family, screenshot worthy. There were more moments. My mom made weird comments about Charlotte, calling her baggage. I finally snapped and told her Charlotte wasn't baggage. She was a little girl who loved unicorns and could already change a tire. Neil being an amazing dad was one of the reasons I loved him. The real shift happened when Tristan's basement flooded after a storm. Neil showed up without being asked, stayed till 3 a.m., hauling soaked boxes and running industrial fans. The next morning, he came back with donuts and coffee and just kept working. Later, I overheard Tristan say to his girlfriend, "Dude's solid. Bree could do worse," which is basically a sonnet coming from him. Neil remembered the plant my mom once mentioned and tracked it down. He and my dad bonded over some obscure 80s sci-fi series. When my grandma had surgery, Neil built the ramp for her walker without being asked. When we got engaged 2 years in, I braced for shade. Instead, my mom hugged Neil and said, "You're nothing like we expected for Brianna." Thank God for that. My dad teared up. Not a metaphor, actual tears. Last week, my mom called to gossip about how my cousin's new boyfriend is nice but just doesn't have Neil's character. This from the woman who once said, "You can do better than a guy with tattoos and a kid." Also doesn't hurt that he's the only one who can fix their Wi-Fi.